Halloween. Chapter 10. Malfoy couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Harry and Ron, and they were still at Hogwarts the next day, looking tired but perfectly cheerful indeed. By the next morning, Harry and Ron thought the meeting with the three-headed dog had been an excellent adventure, and they were quite keen to have another one. In the meantime, Harry filled Ron in on about the package that seemed to have been moved from Gringotts to Hogwarts, and they spent a lot of time wondering what it could possibly be that would need such heavy protection. It's either really valuable or really dangerous, said Ron. Or both, said Harry. But as they knew for sure about the mysterious object was that it was about 2 inches long, and they didn't have much chance of guessing what it was without further clues. Neither Neville nor Hermione showed the slightest interest. Lay underneath that dog's trapdoor. All Neville cared about was never going near that dog again. Hermione was now refusing to speak to Harry and Ron, but she wasn't but which was such a bossy know-it-all that she saw that this was an added bonus. All they really wanted was a way of getting back at Malfoy, and at their great delight, just such a thing arrived in the mail about a week later. The owls flooded the great hall, and usually everyone's attention was caught by one long, thin package carried by 6 large screech owls. Harry was just as interested as everyone else to see who had the larger parcel, and was amazed when the owls soared down and dropped it right in front of him, knocking his bacon to the floor. They had hardly fluttered out of the way when another owl dropped a letter on top of the parcel. Harry ripped open the letter first, which was lucky because it said, "Do not open the parcel at the table. It contains your new Nimbus 2000. But I don't want everybody knowing you've got a broomstick, or they'll all want one. Oliver Wood will meet you tonight on the Quidditch field at 7 o'clock for your first training session. Professor McGonagall." Harry had difficulty hiding his glee as he handed the note to Ron to read. "A Nimbus 2000?" Ron moaned enviously. "I've never even touched one." They left the hall quickly, wanting to unwrap the broomstick in private before their first class, but halfway across the entrance hall they found their way upstairs, barred by Crabbe and Goyle and Malfoy. They seized the package from Harry and felt it. "That's a broomstick," he said, throwing it back at Harry, with a mixture of jealousy and spite in his face. "You'll be in for it this time, Potter. First years aren't allowed to have them." Ron couldn't resist. "It's not any old broomstick," he said. "It's a new Timbers 2000. "What did you say you've got at home, Malfoy? A Comet 260? Ron grinned at Harry. "Comets look flashy, but they're not quite the same league as a Nimbus." "What would you know about it, Weasley? You couldn't afford half the handle." Malfoy snapped back. "I suppose you and your brothers have to save up twig by twig." Before Ron could answer, Professor Flitwick appeared at Malfoy's elbow. "Not arguing, I hope, boys," he squeaked. "Potter's been sent a broomstick, Professor," said Malfoy quickly. "Yes, yes, that's right," said Professor Flitwick, beaming at Harry. "Professor McGonagall told me all about the special circumstances, Potter." "And what model is it?" "A Nimbus 2000, sir," said Harry, trying not to laugh and look at the horror on Malfoy's face. "And it really is thanks to Malfoy here that I've got it," he added. Harry and Ron headed upstairs, smothering their laughter at Malfoy's obvious rage and confusion. "Well, it's true," Harry chortled as they reached the top of the marble staircase. "If he hadn't stolen Neville's Rembrandtball, I wouldn't have been on the team." "So I suppose you think that's the reward for breaking the rules?" came an angry voice from just behind them. Hermione was stomping up the stairs, looking disapprovingly at the package as the upstairs looked in Harry's hand. "I thought you weren't speaking to us," said Harry. "Yes, don't stop now," said Ron. It's doing us so much good." Hermione marched away with her nose up in the air. Harry had a lot of trouble keeping his mind on his lessons that day, he kept wandering off to the dormitory, where his new broomstick was lying on his bed, out of straying off of to the Quidditch field, where he'd be learning to play at night. He bolted with his dinner evening without noticing what he was eating. Then he rushed upstairs to Ron to unwrap the Nimbus 2000 at last. Wow! Ron sighed as the broomstick rolled into Harry's bedspread. Even Harry, who is nothing about different brooms, thought it was pretty wonderful, sleek, shiny, with a mahogany handle. It had long tail near the straight trigs of the Nimbus 2000 written in gold near the top. As 7 o'clock drew near, Harry left the castle to set off at dusk towards the Quidditch field. He'd never been inside a stadium before. Hundreds of seats were raised. It stands about the field that the spectators were high enough so they could see what was going on. At each end of the field there were two golden poles with hoops at the end. They reminded Harry of little plastic sticks Muggles children used to blow bubbles through, except they were about 50 feet high. Too eager to fly again to wait for wood, Harry mounted his broom and kicked off from the ground. What a feeling! He swooped in and out of the goalposts, and then sped up and down the field. The Nimbus 2000 turned wherever he wanted at the slightest touch. "Hey, Potter, come down!" Oliver Wood arrived, and he was carrying a large wooden crate under his arm. Harry landed next to him. "Very nice," said Wood, his eyes glinting. "I see what McGonagall meant. You really are natural. I'm just going to teach you the rules this evening. Then you'll be joining the practice 3 times a week." He opened the crate. Inside were 4 different balls. "Right," said Wood. "Now, Quidditch is easy enough to understand, even if it's not too easy to play. There are 7 players on each side. 3 of them are called chasers." "3 chasers," Harry repeated, and Wood took out the bright red ball, about the size of a soccer ball. "This ball is called the quaffle," said Wood. "The chasers throw the quaffle to each other and try to get it through one of the hoops to score a goal. 10 points every time the quaffle goes through one of the hoops. Follow me?" "Chasers throw the quaffle and put it through the hoops. Score," Harry recited. "So that's a sort of like basketball on the broomsticks with 6 hoops, is it?" "What's basketball?" asked Wood curiously. Never mind," said Harry quickly. "Now, there's another player on each side. They're called keepers. I am a keeper for Gryffindor. I have to fly around the hoops and stop the other team from scoring. 3 chasers and a keeper," said Harry, who was determined to remember it all. "And they play with the quaffle. Okay, I got that. So, what are they for?" He pointed to the 3 balls to the left inside the box. "I'll show you now," Wood said. "Take this." He handed Harry a small cloth, a bit like a sort of baseball bat. "I'm going to show you what the bludgers do," Wood said. "There are 2 bludgers." He showed Harry 2 identical balls, jet black and slightly smaller than the quaffle. Harry noticed that they seemed to be straining to escape the straps holding them inside the box. "Stand back," Wood warned Harry. He bent down and freed one of the bludgers. At once, the rose into the air and pelted from a breaking neck noise and sent zigzagging away into the air. It zoomed around their heads and then a shot at Wood, who dived on top of it and managed to pin it to the ground. "See?" Wood panted, forcing the bludger back into the crate and strapping it down safely. "The bludgers rocket around, trying to knock players off their brooms. That's why you have to have 2 beaters on each team. The Weasley twins are ours. It's their job to protect their side from the bludgers and try to knock them towards the other team. So, you think you got all that? 3 chasers try to score the quaffle, the keeper guards the goalpost, and the beaters keep the bludgers away from the team." Harry reeled off. "Very good," said Wood. Have the bludgers ever killed anyone?" Harry asked hopefully, sounding offhand. "Never at Hogwarts. We've had a couple of broken jaws, but nothing worse than that. Now, last member of the team is the Seeker. That's you. And you don't have anything to worry about, the quaffle or the bludgers, unless they crack my head open." Don't worry, the Weasleys are more than that match for the Bludgers. I mean, they're like a two pair of human bludgers themselves. Wood reached into the crate and took out the fourth and last ball. Compared to the Quaffle and the Bludgers, it was tiny. It's about the size of a large walnut. It was bright gold and had little fluttering wings. There were silver wings. This, said Wood, this is the golden snitch, and it is the most important ball of the lot. It is very hard to catch one of these. It's so fast and so difficult to see. It's the seeker's job to catch it. You've got to weave in and out of the chasers and bludgers in the quaffle to get it before the other team's seeker, because whichever seeker catches the snitch wins his team an extra 150 points, so they nearly always win. That's why the seekers get found so much. A game of Quidditch only ends when the snitch is caught, so it can go on for ages. I think the record is 3 months. They had to keep bringing in substitutes for the players so they could get some sleep. Well, that's it. Any questions? Harry shook his head. He understood what he had to do, all right. It was doing that was going to be the problem. Why don't we practice with the snitch yet? We won't practice with the snitch yet, said Wood carefully, shutting it back inside the crate. It's too dark. We might lose it. Let's try you out with a few of those, or a few of these. He puffed up a bag of ordinary golf balls in his pockets. A few minutes later, he and Harry were up in the air, Wood throwing the golf balls as hard as he could in every direction for Harry to catch. Harry didn't miss a single one. Wood was delighted. After an hour at night, the really fallen, they couldn't carry on. The Quidditch Cup will have our name on it this year, said Wood happily, as they trudged back up to the castle. I wouldn't be surprised if you turned into be better than Charlie Weasley, and he could have played for England if he hadn't gone off chasing dragons. Perhaps it was because he was now so busy with Quidditch peer practice 3 evenings a week and the top of all his homework, but Harry could hardly believe it was like when he realized that he had already been at Hogwarts for 2 months. The castle felt more like home than Privet Drive ever had. His lessons, too, were becoming more and more interesting now that they were mastered the basics. On Halloween morning, they woke up to a delicious smell of baking pumpkin wafting through the corridors. Even better, Professor Flitwick announced the charms that he thought they were ready to start making objects fly, something that they had been dying to try since they had seen them make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. Professor Flitwick put the class into pairs. Harry's partner was Seamus Finnegan, which was a relief because Neville had been trying to catch his eye. Ron, however, was to be working with Hermione Granger. It was hard to tell whether Ron or Hermione was angry about this. She hadn't spoken to either of them since the day Harry's broomstick had arrived. Now, don't forget what a nice wrist movement we've been practicing, squeaked Professor Flitwick, perched on the pile of books as usual. Swish, flick. Remember, swish, flick. And saying the magic words properly, very important too. Never forget Wizard Barufo, and you say S instead of F. And I found himself on the floor with a buffalo on his chest. It was very difficult. Harry and Seamus swished and flicked, but the feather was just where it's supposed to be, sending skyward. Just lay on their desk. Seamus got so impatient that he prodded it with his wand to set fire to it. Harry had to put it out with his hat. Ron, on the next table, wasn't having much luck. Wingardium Leviosa, she said, waving his long arms like a windmill. You're saying it wrong, Harry heard Hermione snap. It's Wingardium Leviosa. Make the ga nice and long. You do it then, if you're so clever, Ron snarled. Hermione rolled up her sleeves on her gown, flicked her wand, and said, Wingardium Leviosa. The feather rose off the desk and hovered over about a feet above their heads. Oh, well done, cried Professor Flitwick, clapping. Everyone, see, Miss Granger's done it. Ron was in a very bad mood by the end of class. It was no wonder that when no one can stand her, he said when Harry pushed their way through the crowded corridor. She's a nightmare, honestly. Someone knocked into Harry and they hurried past him. It was Hermione. Harry caught a glimpse of her face. She was startled to see her, then she was in tears. I think she heard you. So? Said Ron, but he looked a bit uncomfortable. She must have noticed she's got no friends. Hermione didn't turn up for the next class and wasn't seen all afternoon. On their way down to the great hall for the Halloween feast, Harry and Ron overheard Parvati Patil telling her friends that Lavender and that Hermione was crying in the girls' bathroom and wanted to be left alone. Ron looked more awkward at this, but at the moment later, they had entered the great hall with the Halloween decorations, put Hermione out of their minds. 1,000 live bats fluttered the walls and ceilings, while 1,000 more swooped over the tables in black clouds, making the candles and the pumpkins stutter. The feast appeared suddenly, and golden plates, as it had at the start of term banquet. Harry was just helping himself to baked potatoes when Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall. His turban was askew, terror on his face, and everyone, seared to reach Professor Dumbledore's chair, clumped against the table and gasped, Troll! In the dungeons! Thought you ought to know. He then sank to the floor in a dead faint. There was an uproar. It took several purple firecrackers exploding from the end of Dumbledore's wand to bring silence. Professor, or prefects, he rumbled. Lead your houses to the dormitories immediately. Percy, in his element. Follow me! Stick together, first years. No need to fear the troll. If you follow me, your orders. Now stay close. Behind me. Make way first. First year's coming through. Excuse me. I'm a prefect. How could a troll get in? Harry asked as they climbed the stairs. Don't ask me. They're supposed to be really stupid, said Ron. Maybe Peeves let it in as a Halloween joke. They passed different groups of people, hurrying in different directions. As they jostled their way through the crowd or confused Hufflepuffs, Harry suddenly grabbed Ron's arms. Had a thought. Hermione. What about her? She doesn't know about the troll. Ron bit his lip. Oh, all right, he snapped. But Percy's better not see us. Ducking down, they joined the Hufflepuffs, going the other way, slipped down in deserted side corridors, and hurried off towards the girls' bathroom. They had just returned the corner when they heard the quick footsteps behind them. Percy! Hissed Ron, pulling Harry behind them. Sooner in the Griffin, peering around it. However, they saw no Percy, but they saw Snape. He crossed the corridor and disappeared from view. Where's he going? Harry whispered. Why isn't he down in the dungeons with the rest of the teachers? Search me! Quickly as possible, he crept along the next corridor at Snape's fading footsteps. He's heading for the third floor, Harry said, but Ron held up his hand. Can you smell something? Harry sniffed. The foul stench reached his nostrils, a mixture of old socks and the kind of a public toilet no one wants to seems to clean. Then they heard it, a low grunting, and then shuffling and footfalls, gigantic feet. Ron pointed. At the end of the passage to the left, something huge was moving toward him. They shrank into the shadows and watched as it emerged into a patch of moonlight. It was a horrible sight, 12 feet tall. Its skin was dull and granite gray. Its great lumpy body, like boulders, with its small bald head, perched on top like a coconut. It had short legs and thick as tree trunks, and a flat, horny feet, and the smell coming from it was incredible. It was holding a huge wooden club that dragged along the floor because its arms were so long. The troll stopped next to the doorway and peered inside, wiggled its long ears, making up its tiny mind, then slouched slowly into the room. The key's in the lock, Harry muttered. We could lock it in. Good idea, said Ron nervously. So they edged towards the door, open mouth dry, praying the troll wasn't about to come out of it. With one great leap, Harry managed to grab the key and slam the door shut and lock it. Yes! Flushed with their victory, they started to run back up to the passage. But as they reached the corner, they heard something that made their hearts stop. High, petrified screams, and it was coming from the chamber. They had chained they just chained up. Oh no, said Ron in a pale, bloody baron. It's the girls' bathroom. Harry gasped. Hermione, they said together. It was the last thing they wanted to do, but they had no choice. They did. What choice did they have? Wheeling around, they sprinted back to the door and turned to the key. Fumbling in their panic, Harry pulled the door open, and inside, Hermione Granger was shrieking against the wall opposite, looking as if she was about to faint. The troll was advancing on her, knocking the sinks off the wall as it went. Confuse it, Harry said desperately to Ron, and seizing a tap, he threw it hard as he could against the wall. The troll stopped a few feet from Hermione. It lumbered around, blinking stupidly to see what had made that noise. Its mean little eyes saw Harry. It hesitated, then made for him instead. Lifting the club, it went. Oi, pea-brain! Yelled Ron from the other side of the chamber, and he threw a metal pipe at it. The troll didn't even seem to notice the pipe hitting his shoulder, but he heard the yell and paused again, turning its ugly snout this time towards Ron instead, giving Harry time to run around it. Come on, run! Run! Yelled Harry yelled at Hermione, trying to pull her towards the door, but she couldn't move. She was flat against the wall, her mouth open in terror. The shouting of the echoes seemed to be driving the troll berserk. It roared again and started towards Ron, who was nearest, who had no way to escape. Harry did something that was both very brave and very stupid. He took a great running jump and managed to fasten his arms around the troll's neck from behind. The troll couldn't feel Harry's hanging there, but even the troll noticed if you stick a long bit of wood up your nose. Harry's wand had still been in his hands when he shoved the wood up his nose. He jumped. It had gone straight up the troll's nostrils. Howling with pain, the troll twisted and flailed and clubbed, with Harry clinging for dear life. Any second the troll was going to rip him off and catch him in a terrible blow with the club. Hermione had sunk to the floor with fright. Ron pulled out his own wand, not knowing what he was going to say, and he heard himself cry the spell that came out of his head. Wingardium Leviosa! The club suddenly flew up with out of the troll's hand and rose high in the air above the ground and turned slowly over and dropped with a sickening crack onto the owner's head. The troll swayed on the spot, fell flat on his face, and with a thud that made the whole room tremble. Harry got to his feet. He was shaking and out of breath, and Ron was standing there with his wand still raised, staring at what he had done. It was Hermione who spoke first. Is it dead? I don't think so, Harry, said Harry. I think it's just been knocked out. He bent down and pulled the wand out of the troll's nose. It was covered in what looked like lumpy gray glue. Ugh, troll boogers. He wiped it on the troll's trousers. Suddenly, slamming loud footsteps made the three of them look up. They hadn't realized what racket they'd been making, but of course, someone downstairs must have heard the crashes and the troll's roars. A moment later, Professor McGonagall had come bursting into the room, closely followed by Snape, Quirrell, and bringing them up the rear. Quirrell took the look at the troll, let out a faint whimper, and sat down on the toilet, clutching his heart. Snape bent over the troll. Professor McGonagall was looking at Ron, Harry, and Harry had never seen a look so angry. Her lips were white. Hopes of winning 50 points for Gryffindor faded quickly from Harry's mind. What on earth are you thinking of, Professor McGonagall? With cold fury in her voice. Harry and Ron looked at her, still standing with the wand in the air. You're lucky you weren't killed! Why aren't you in your dormitory? Snape gave Harry a swift, piercing look. Harry looked at the floor. He wished Ron would put his wand down. The small voice came out of the shoulders. Please, Professor McGonagall. They were looking for me. Miss Granger? Hermione managed to get to her feet at last. I went looking for the troll because I thought I could deal with it on my own, 'cause I've read all about them." Ron dropped his run. Hermione Granger telling a downright lie to a teacher? "If they'd found me, I'd be dead now. Harry stuck his wand up his nose, and Ron knocked it out with a club over its head. They didn't have to come to fetch anyone. It was about to finish me off when they arrived." Harry and Ron tried to look as though the story wasn't new to them. "Well, in that case," Professor McGonagall staring at the three of them, "Miss Granger, you foolish girl! How could you think of tackling such a mountain troll as on your own?" Hermione hung her head. Harry was speechless. Hermione was the last person to do anything against the rules, and here she was, pretending that she had to get them out of trouble. It was as if Snape had started handing out sweets. "Miss Granger, 5 points will be taken from Gryffindor for this," said Professor McGonagall. "I'm very disappointed in you, and you're lucky you weren't hurt at all. You better go off to Gryffindor Tower. Students are finishing up their feast in the houses." Hermione laughed. Professor McGonagall turned to Harry and Ron. "Well, I will say you were lucky, but not many first years could have taken off a full-grown mountain troll. You each win Gryffindor 5 points. Professor Dumbledore will be informed of this. You may go." They hurried up the chamber and didn't speak at all until they climbed the 2 floors. It was a relief to be away from the smell of that troll, quite apart from anything else. "We should have got more than 10 points," Ron grumbled. "5, you mean, once she'd taken off Hermione's." "Good of her to get us out of trouble like that," Ron admitted. "Mind you, we did save her." "She might not have needed saving if we hadn't locked the thing in with her," Harry reminded him. They hadn't reached the portrait of the fat lady. "Pig snout," they said as they entered. The common room was packed and noisy. Everyone was eating the food that had been sent up. Hermione, however, stood alone by the door waiting for them. There was a very embarrassing pause. Then none of them looking at each other, they all said thanks and then hurried off to their pet to get plates. But from that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. And some things you just can't share without ending up liking each other. And knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them.